So hey there fellow YouTubers, it's Frank Bush here again. So a couple videos back, I did a do-it-yourself rapid ridgeline where I walked through all the details of exactly how to build one of those out. And people seem to like that video, so I thought I'd stop and do another video now of do-it-yourself rapid guylines. So the only two objects that are needed in this video, other than a few tools to kind of make things happen, is some paracord and a piece of bamboo that I have here. So if you're interested in wanting to know how to make your own do-it-yourself rapid guylines, then stay tuned. Okay, so just move things around a bit, kind of clear space. And I want to just get right into it. So the first knot that I'm going to use here is called a French bowline. And for people that are kind of savvy in the bushcraft community and have done lots of knots, you know, bowlines are a standard knot that you guys use all the time out in the field. It's a very common knot to be used just to put a loop on the end of a line and that kind of stuff. And the French bowline is very similar, other than you put two loops instead of one into the line. So I'll walk through that now, yeah? So from the cut end where, you know, the line has just been severed, if you will, I'm going to walk it back about 2 feet or so, and I'm going to start my knot, you know, maybe even a little bit more, say 2.5 feet or so. I'm not big on exact measurements, but you know, you get a feel for it as you're doing it, and it's easy enough to tie these knots. If you feel like everything's too small, just undo it, give yourself a bit more rope, and go again. I haven't cut any rope at this point in time. I'm still working off the spool, yeah? So needless to say, I'm going to start by just putting a loop into the line where I just kind of pivot it over, and now just like a normal bowline, I'm going to feed through that loop and create, you know, my first kind of bowline loop, if you will. I'll just hold that one. I'm going to come around. I'm going to go through now a second time and feed that through, and then I'm going to wrap around the line coming off the spool and then back through that hole again. So it's just like a normal bowline would be, except I've gone around twice, yeah? And the end that's been cut, my working end, if you will, I'm going to turn around and pull that and give it that I have a half decent amount of more of that line past the end of the loops. And because it'll be used later on as we go, yeah? So needless to say, when I kind of pull things and tighten it up, it just becomes like a typical bowline knot, except you'll see that, you know, the French bowline has 2 loops instead of the 1, and you can see that, you know, the cut end, the working end, if you will, is a fair bit longer than the end of those 2 loops. And the handy part about the French bowline knot is if you find that, you know, these loops aren't the same size and that kind of stuff, it's easy enough to turn around and pull one side, and it'll make that loop bigger and the other loop smaller. And, you know, you kind of can adjust it that way until they're even to each other in size. And if you turn around and apply pressure on one of those, it will hold and lock. I'll just pull that tight. And if you apply it on the other side, it'll hold and lock. But if there is no tension being applied and you need to do that kind of fine adjustment stuff for the loop sizes, it's easy enough to do that kind of stuff, yeah? So one way or the other, you kind of set it where your loops are both the same size, and you know you've got a good tag line that's coming off. So that's going to be the first stage. Now I'm going to shift camera angles, and we'll move on to the next step, yeah? Okay, so for the next step, I've got that piece of bamboo that I mentioned earlier, you know, and this is really just a small diameter bamboo, and I'm going to cut off the chunk about this big, and then I'm going to split that in half at about the halfway point, you know. And to give you an idea, there's my finger, so we're talking about the diameter of my finger is what I'm using, you know. This doesn't have to be a big beefy piece of bamboo. So I'll just cut scenes here, switch over, cut this, and then we'll move on to the next stage, yeah. All right, and I'll just cut this over on the wood instead of on the rug thing that I got there, just to kind of keep the mess to a dull roar, you know how it is. But this doesn't have to be exact science stuff either. This is all just kind of by feel, right? If I just need a couple inches of 2 pieces of bamboo, really. So So like I say, I'll just turn around and cut this one in half as well, because really I just need 2 of these that are only small, right? So I'll go off and do that. I won't bother recording that part, but just wanted to kind of show you this is simple enough to kind of hack through and all that kind of happiness, right? And I don't like missing steps when I'm doing videos like this. So either way, I'll cut this and then I'll come back. Okay, so I've got my 2 pieces of bamboo cut here, as you can see, within reason, you know, the same size. And now to give you an idea of the full size of it, it's you know, about the size of my middle finger, you know, one of my fingers, if you will, in that regard, right? Like I say, this isn't exact science stuff. You just need it to be a good couple inches to make sure that you've got room to work with. So I've just got my pocket knife here, and I'm just gonna turn around and with these pieces of bamboo, because they've got the kind of hard edge on the ends, you know, on both ends of it where I just cut it and stuff, I'm just going to do a bit of chamfering, where in essence all I'm doing is just taking a little bit off, just trying to round those corners a bit. You know, one of the things about longevity when it comes to the paracord stuff, right? Now, if you don't want any hard edges kind of rubbing against the paracord as you go through time, that'll just wear things out. So this is really just to take off some of those hard corners. So, and as you can see, there's not really a lot to it. Hopefully the camera's giving it justice, but I'm just kind of rounding off those corners a bit with the knife, right? So I'll go off and do that, and then I'll cut back for the next part of this. Okay, so like I say, I just kind of clean these up with my pocket knife, just kind of rounded the edges a bit so there's no hard corners. When, you know, feel it with your finger and just see, and it doesn't have to be bamboo. Like I'm using bamboo in this example just because it was what I had readily available. But, you know, if you're using small sticks or any of that kind of stuff, it's all good, you know, debark the sticks and get them to the same point, if you will. You know, fairly simple. But for the next step, what I'm going to do is I've got what they call gimlets. So for people that aren't familiar with gimlets, they're almost like little drills, if you will. So you could do this with a drill, or not. I just have these, this gear with me. I just pulled it off my hip. This is part of my everyday carry that I kind of wear as part of my, you know, day-to-day life, if you will. But in essence, I'm just going to turn around, and now in the center of these pieces of bamboo, I'm just going to turn around and drill a hole. Now I'm using tiny gimlets at first. These are way smaller than the size of, you know, paracord, but as part of, you know, one of my other everyday carries, I've got a larger gimlet now, and this gimlet is big enough to be the equivalent of being able to feed a piece of paracord through. And I keep this as part of my everyday carry kit with a Scotch eye auger and that kind of stuff, you know. And I'll probably do a separate video talking about the details of exactly how that's done, or, you know, using these and that kind of stuff when you're out in the field. But needless to say, these are just kind of some woodworking tools that I can wear that are the size, you know, within reason of a pocket knife, and allow me to do kind of more advanced woodworking stuff when I'm out in the field, yeah? But either way, so I'm just going to use this little gimlet, and like I say, it's really just like a hand drill. You know, you kind of set it on and just kind of start to work it into the bamboo, and you'll start to feel a hole. I've got to do it down on the floor, and so the camera angle is not going to be good, but you could easily turn around and just drill this, or you could use your pocket knife and just kind of carve out a hole. But in essence, all we're wanting to do is put a hole in the center on this side that comes out on this side, yeah? And that way we've got a place that we can feed paracord through. So I'll cut off and do that with the gimlets, and I won't bother going through the full details of using these, but I'll go off and do that, and then I'll cut back once the holes are there and ready to go, yeah? Okay, so I've put my holes in, as you can see, to the bamboo. Now, I will say that when you're doing this kind of stuff, because you're dealing with small pieces of wood, you could have split out, and that happens really easily. I switched from gimlet to gimlet to get up to the size of the hole that I'm using here. So I actually drilled it out with multiple gimlets. The same would apply if you're using a drill, especially when it comes to bamboo, just the nature of, you know, how bamboo is structured and that kind of thing, right? But needless to say, when it comes to drilling these out, just take your time you know, switch from small drill bits up to larger and larger ones until you know they're big enough that the paracord can fit through, or you'll split them out. You'll have to go back and recut new pieces and do it over and over again, as long as you keep splitting it out until you get to the point where you're taking your time and you're just doing it, you know, piece by piece. But either way, so now the next step is going to be really, I'm going to take that tag end of line that I had now, and I'm just going to slide the paracord through the hole as such so that it's going to be on that line. And I'm just going to slip it right up near where that bowline knot is, or the French bowline knot here. And I'm just going to now do a little overhand knot and tie that off. And I want that to be up and really close, as close as I can get it, to the bowline knot, so that that toggle is just locked onto the line right at that point, yeah? So it should look like that, and you know, nothing complex. And it's really, the way I'm designing this is, yeah, if that toggle breaks down the road, I can just whip off a new one and kind of carry on as I move through my day, if you will. But the critical part is you still have a good length of line that sits past the end of these loops. That's going to be one of the most important aspects to this whole setup. So I'm going to need to have 2 full sets of this contraption here. So what I'm going to do now, as the next step, I'm going to turn around and just take my knife, and I'm going to cut off a length of paracord up from the bowline that's from the main spool. Now, I know I might have a bit of line waste here, but I'm going to give myself a couple feet here. I'm going to be, you know, fairly generous and give myself, say, 2.5, 3 feet here, because I'm going to have to tie a prusik with this later on in the video. But I'm just going to go off and, like I say, I'll be a little bit more than generous. I'm going to turn around and just snub it there and make sure I burn my ends with a lighter. Just see if I got my lighter on me. Yeah, there we go. So I'm just going to burn my ends with the lighter to make sure it doesn't fray or any of that business. And I know there's paracord guys out there that, oh, you know, use the cutting tools and all that. Well, I'm a bit of a savage that way, and I think I've mentioned that in previous videos. But either way, so I've got 1 set of these now. I'm going to have to make a full second set of exactly what I've shown so far in the video. So I'll go off and do that. It only actually takes me a couple minutes to do that entire thing. So I'll go off and do that, and then I'll cut back and we'll move forward, yeah? Okay, so it's about 2-3 minutes later now. So you can see I now have 2 of them, and they're pretty well identical in every way, right? You've got the French bowline, you've got the little toggle tied in, it's got the good lead line that goes past the loops, and then I gave myself just a couple feet on this end to kind of work with. Now the next step will be deciding on how long you want a guy line to be. So typically I normally make my guy lines anywhere from 6 to 8 feet long, but in this specific build out I'm going to probably make it a bit longer. So I'm going to end up just going with a piece of cordage that's, say, I don't know, maybe 10 foot long. I'll just make them a little bit longer. And the thinking really is I'm just going to put a basic stopper knot. So, you know, just little overhand knot, nothing complicated here. And I'm just going to set that onto the line. And I always like to make it a habit, just in case I have a hard time when I'm out in the wet and the cold in the woods, of giving myself an extra little tag where I'll just turn around and put on another little knot, and I'll give myself about an inch or 2, just in case I need to pull that for some reason later on. So it's just a habit I do as I go through time. But so you're going to have, in essence, 2 stopper knots that are going to be, you know, 2 inches apart from each other. So I'm just going to take a length of this paracord off the spool. Like I say, I'll run that out, say probably closer to 10 foot, cut it, and I'll do the exact same thing on the other side of that, where I just put the 2 little knots in, yeah? So I'll go off and do that, and then I'll come back. Okay, so as the next step, what I've done here is I've just strung up the main guy line, that 10 foot length there. I just strung it up between 2 tension points so I could work with it and show you guys in the camera on a half decent angle. Here, let me shift you a bit here. And hopefully this will help just kind of give you guys a better angle to see. So now I've got one of those components that we built out earlier, right? I'm just going to set this part to the ground. And now on the spare bit of cordage that we kind of left as a tail on that end, I'm just going to turn around and form a bite in the line. And I'm going to turn around and just set that onto the line as such and pull it over. And now the thinking really is I'm going to take the two inside pieces and I'm just going to pull those through. So I'm going to pull through that toggle and those French loops and that. I'm going to do that 3 times. As such. And we'll do one more to the inside, if you will. Hopefully the camera is giving this justice. And I pull those through. And now I'm just going to kind of roll these as I'm pulling on these two. I'm kind of rolling this, and really I'm just forming a prusik loop on the line as we go. I gotta dress up that knot a bit now. And I'm gonna keep pulling the tension out of it. And dress that knot up a bit. And it should look something along that lines. And that's now your standard kind of prusik loop that you would put on a line. You know, of generally speaking, what I'd want to do now is just to make sure that this has kind of good grip on the line. It's already at the point where, see how when I pull it, it's got a bit of slip to it still. And as that line tightens up, it'll make it that it doesn't slip anymore. But if that knot is loose at all, it'll want to slip. So what I'll do is kind of open it up, and this short piece, I'll wrap that around one more time and just feed that through. And then what I'll do is on this side, I'll just kind of wrap around that line and just put a little knot there just to lock this prusik. And so I'll make sure everything's really dressed up well and that knot's got a lot of tension. So it's in a good state. And now that little overhand knot that I have there, I'm just going to slide that right up and get it as close to the prusik set as I can. And I can see it's still got a bit of looseness there, so I'll just kind of pull on that, make sure I get the tension. And it really just helps keep that prusik firm on the line. Now, this prusik can slide on the line. See, normally prusiks grip better if this line that I've got coming off to this unit, if this line was a bit thinner diameter, it would want to grip onto the paracord far better. But because the paracord, you know, we're paracord on paracord, these prusiks can become a little loose. And by doing what I just did here, can help kind of keep them tight. Now, at this point in time, if this was a bit longer, you could easily tie off another loop right here just to have that on the guy line, or you could use a marlin spike hitch and just attach on another toggle if you wanted it here. Now, I don't feel it's necessary in this specific example, but that gives you an idea of how this kind of constructs, if you will. So, like I say, this is free to move along the line now, but as soon as I apply tension, it'll lock and hold in either direction. And that's the key part that we want there, is to know that we have the best of both worlds that way. So your knot should look like a normal prusik, and then you'll have the extra little bit where I've just tied this knot to ensure that that prusik kind of locks in well and stuff, yeah? So I've attached the one now, and it's on there a little firm. Like you can see, it's a little meatier than a normal prusik would be if you're used to using prusiks. And I like it like that because you want to have it that when you're dealing with tensions on guy lines and stuff, that it really does have a firm, meaty grip on the line. So as soon as you apply tension, you know it's not going to slip and give, yeah? So I'm going to do the same exact thing that I just did attaching this setup on. I'm going to turn around and just attach on the second one now, just down from it. And I'll do that off camera. But at that point in time, we'll have a completed guy line set, and I'll show you that. And then it's getting late tonight, but tomorrow what I'll do is it'll be in the same video, but I'll end up wrapping up the video tonight and just kind of chilling out. And then tomorrow when the sun's up, I'll take this out in the field and I'll show you guys an in-field example of it. But I'm going to attach this one on exactly the same way that I just did with this unit and this setup, yeah? Okay, well, I'll do one more show now of just the complete guy line before I take it out in the field, and just kind of walk through it, and then we'll, like I say, tomorrow I'll go out in the field. But so you can see on that end, I've got the two knots that were kind of at the stopper knots. There's the very first component that we built, and it had the French bowlines on there. This is just the length of the guy line that would run, and then the exact same French bowline setup is over on this side with the two stopper knots here and here, right? So I would end up making a set of 4 of these as I go through, so I could have one for, 4 or more, if you will. So I could have one for each corner of the tarp when I'm out in the field. But like I say, it's better to just kind of take these out and go through a living, real-world example of it. It looks like just a jumbled mess of cordage at this point in time. But it's better to see exactly why I've done these things, and stuff will become really clear once we get out into the field and you see them fully being used, yeah? So, like I say, I'll make that my next scene. Is I'll take it out and show a real world example of how these get used and why they're so handy the way that they're built in this fashion, yeah? Alright, fellow YouTubers, so it's the next morning and I've just got my bit of gear here with me to show the example. So if you haven't seen it before, this is my do-it-yourself rapid ridge lines. I showed this in a couple videos ago. I'm going to use this as part of the example just to set up the tarp here, and then I'll turn around and go into a detailed showing of the adjustable rapid release guy lines that we've been building out through the video. So give me a few minutes here to just turn around and put out my ridge line and throw up this tarp, and then I'll go and show that. Okay, so it's about a minute later now. As you can see, I've got the rapid ridge line set up now. If you want to understand a detailed breakdown of that, how it's made and how to use it and all that, go back and watch my previous video. It's 2 or 3 videos ago about the do-it-yourself rapid ridge lines, and you can learn how to do those exactly the way I have for yourself. But needless to say, I've pinned down these 3 corners here, and now I've got just this 4th corner, and that's the one I'll use for the example to show you some of the aspects of this adjustable rapid release ridge line or guy line, yeah? So just give me 2 seconds, I'll flip camera angles and then we'll start doing close. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to show is connecting this setup onto the grommet, yeah? So I've got these 2 loops here. I'm just going to feed one of the loops through that grommet, kind of poke it out. I'm going to take the other loop and feed it through the first loop as such. Now I've got this loop now, and I'm going to turn around and take off the raw line that has the cordage to it. I'm just going to feed that through that loop and just pull it all the way. Now I'm just going to kind of apply tension, and you can see now, hopefully the camera's giving this justice, this locks this grommet and it's not going anywhere. So it makes it really easy to be able to kind of just quickly strap on your guy line to your tarp without really having to get into any type of knots or anything. I'll go through the toggles uses and all that stuff in a minute, but just wanted to kind of show this right up close and in detail of how easy it is to strap onto a grommet of the tarp corner. So I'll go off and hook on the other end, and then I'll start walking through some of the other details of this setup, yeah? All right, so now on this end, I just put a stick into the ground to use as an example. Just forgot to bring any type of tent pegs, and sticks are easy enough, right? So needless to say, I've got the other end now of this setup, and I'm just gonna pull a bit of tension out of the line. And this is all set up loose, so you don't have to apply tension while you're doing this. You can apply it after the fact. But this can be as simple as just, hooking your loops on, if you will. You can go just that easy. Or if you want to make this end quick release, you can do the same kind of concept where you take one of the loops, wrap it around the object, feed your other loop through, and then grab it, take the tag of line, feed that through, and just apply a bit of tension. Then that'll lock it on this way just as well. So now I'll turn around and apply tension to this guy line, and you can start to see some of the flexibility that goes on here. All right, so now if you remember, we put those prusiks on the line, yeah? So it's easy enough now to turn around and just start to slide those prusiks along my guy line, and it'll automatically just start to apply tension. And as you can see, wherever I leave it, it'll just lock and hold, and if I want to loosen some tension, I simply slide it back. But I'll apply a half decent amount of tension here. And the same thing can happen on the other prusik. I'll shift over and kind of show that. But as you can see, it makes it really elementary. I didn't really have to tie any knots here to set up this ridge line, and the length of it becomes adjustable within reason to the length of the guy line itself. So, if you've got a small space that you're working with, it's easy enough to adjust to that. If you've got a longer length, you can turn around and just leave a bit of slack cord. So it's really flexible in that regard. But I'll shift camera angles and I'll show over on the other side. I'll just loosen off a bit of the tension here so I can tighten it over on that side, yeah? So now you'll be able to see it's very much just the exact same thing on this end of where I've got that prusik, and then I've got the line where it had the two knots, my main guy line. It's easy enough to just slide that prusik along and apply the tension that I need. And it's done. It's just that simple. And if I feel like things are too tight, pop it back a bit. Give a bit of tension back off. So you can make your guy lines, like I said, to the length of whatever the main body of the cordage is. You could even use this kind of setup for ridge lines and that kind of thing. But I'll go back now. I'll shift back to the tarp and I'll show you the rapid release aspect of this, because like I say, now we've got kind of tension on the tarp. Everything's taut. Like I say, I can apply plenty of tension. I don't want to go too much because I don't want to rip the grommets off the tarp, but one way or the other, this thing's up nice and tight. It's got good rigidity to it in that regard. I wouldn't be concerned about, wind or anything else destabilizing the setup at all. So, but like I say, I'll shift back up to the grommet and I'll show you the quick release to show you how simple it is, yeah? So I just kind of pan back a bit to show you. Hopefully you can see the tension pulling on the tarp right there. It's definitely applying an ample amount of tension. And I'll go in close to the grommets now, yeah? Okay, so, and at this point, this is where I'll show the quick release aspect of this. So given the way that we've strapped this in, we've just got this, end lead, a line that went through the loops, yeah? If I want to release this quickly from the tarp setup, even though it's under full tension and everything else, I don't even want to adjust my prusiks or anything. I just want to pull it down, and I need to do it now. I grab onto the end that has the toggle on it. I turn around and grab that cord and simply pull it through, and then I pull that out and it's off. It's just as simple as that. That whole end's just quick released, and I'm right back to having my original setup. I'll just loosen it off and at the prusik here, and give myself a bit more length, and I'll show you, the exact same thing applies over to the other end, yeah? In fact, I'll just show you that connection just one more time. So I take out of the two loops, I feed one of them through. And these are tiny grommets, so I'm barely able to even feed that through, but either way, I get that through. I feed the other loop through it. That's already kind of held now, and I just feed that line through. And as it sets, it all just locks into itself. Hopefully the camera's getting a good angle on that. And you can see it's just locked and held. I'll slide that prusik back up and apply my tension back out to the tarp. And like I say, we're back to a real tense point. It's just that simple. So, and the same thing applies over to the other end. Yeah, I'll shift and show that now. So it's really handy if, say this was just a little nub of a root that was sticking out of the ground, a little, came up and then back down again. And this is really handy in that regard where, you can lash on without feeling like you have to loosen everything off and detach knots and everything else. Once again, I'm just going to grab the line that has the toggle so it's easy to remember, and I'm going to turn around and just give that a pull, and I'm off. So it's just as simple as that. Like I say, there's no real need to tie knots when you're out in the field using this kind of setup, yeah? So people are asking now, why do I have these toggles on here? So I'll switch gears and kind of change up the configuration, and now I'll show you these toggles in play, yeah? Okay, so I just dropped my tarp here. I'm just going to use this cordage carabiner that I've got attached to my rapid ridgeline as part of the example here. So when it comes to that toggle now, if I want to kind of chain together cordage and have it, you know, longer distance or that kind of thing, that toggle's on there really just so I can quickly feed that through and hook it on to other loops that I'm using, you know, throughout my systems, and I'm on. You know, it just gives me a way to rapidly be able to strap on to those loops without yet once again being able to, you know, having to tie any knots or any of that kind of business. And I can apply tension through the prusiks just the same as I could earlier. So I don't have the cordage with me to do a further example, but if I wanted to do rope extensions or anything else, most of my cordage, I rely heavily upon loops, and I rely on loops on the ends of my line. So if I wanted to daisy chain, you know, multiple guy lines together to reach a longer distance, it's easy enough just to feed the toggle that I have sitting on one of these rapid guy lines and just feed it through the loops and hook on a second and extend or double the range, if you will, and still, because of those prusiks, have it all be adjustable and that kind of stuff, yeah? So when it comes to using this now, instead of just a guy line, if you want to throw this up between small diameter trees and that kind of thing, I'll show an example of that as well, yeah? And really, the size of these loops here, if you had really large loops, you could end up going around larger diameter trees. But I primarily designed this at only a 10-foot length to be for a guy line. But if I say made my line 25 or 30 feet and made these loops larger, this same construct you could easily apply to becoming a ridge line and give you tension and all that stuff with no knots involved when you're out in the field, and, you know, all quick release and all that happiness, right? So one way or the other, I'll shift positions where I'm at here, and I'm just out in one of my local parks. I'll shift positions where I'm at, and I'll show this more being set up like a ridge line, yeah? Okay, so I just shifted a bit from, I was down by larger trees down there and wanted to shift up to just using some smaller trees. And the only reason why I'm using smaller trees is because of the size of the loops we did on the French bowline. The larger those loops are, the larger the trees are you're able to go around you that you can just kind of hot connect to, if you will. So one way or the other, I'm going to use this little set of trees here and this little set here just to show you in real time how rapidly this can truly be set up, yeah? So I'll just get on with it. I'll just hook onto this tree here. That side's now attached. And I'll hook into this larger one here. And that side's now attached. Now I can simply just pull the tension, and it's taut. And you can see I'm almost pulling that out of the ground with the tension that I'm applying. I mean, that's a rigid line. There's definitely no question. And I can do the same on this one. And you can see it's pulling the whole thing right over. So just that easy. And if I want to pull it and go, just like I showed earlier, on the piece that's the toggle, if that line is a little tight, you can just kind of pull on the toggle and it'll help give you the leverage to loosen that line a bit. You pull that line, I'm free. The same on this side. I grab onto that toggle, kind of loosen it a bit, and I'm free on that side. And then as fast as that, I'm able to turn around and say, okay, I'll just adjust my lines to where I want them to be when it comes to the prusiks floating now on the main line. I can slide them both up to the end, on to one end or the other, and then just wrap up all the spare, yeah? So I'm at the prusiks, or at the end of the line there. kind of keep those two out separate and free. I'll come in close and show this. Make sure I'm getting this on camera okay. So I've showed this in previous videos, but I'm just gonna kind of wrap this guy line now as such, little figure eights. When I get to the point that there's about 2 foot, 1.5 2 foot or so, I just kind of pinch it all, hold it as a bundle, wrap it around, and then loop it back on itself one time. Some people do variants here, but I just tend to be a hook once kind of guy. And it keeps everything in a nice clean bundle when it comes to the actual guy line itself. And then to make everything fully compact, like I say, I've pushed both those French bowlines, I've pushed them both up to just one side of the guy line. So I'm just going to take those as a set and just wrap them around, just so I don't have loose cables going everywhere. And you can see now, it doesn't look like the cleanest mess, but either way it keeps things organized. And there you are, there's the adjustable rapid release guy lines. I hope you enjoyed. So if you made it this far in the video, thanks for watching. Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this ropecraft slash bushcraft stuff. It's for me, these types of things are really invaluable when you're out in the field and you know it's cold and your hands are wet and you don't have the dexterity in your hands, and you're wanting to set things up, you're wanting to do it quickly, and you're wanting to do it without any knots involved when you're out in the field. You know, I call this no knot stuff, and obviously there's knots involved when you first assemble them, as we showed earlier in the video. But when you're out in the field, you could see setting these things up and doing it rapidly didn't really involve any knots. You know, it really takes all that away. So if you are out and it's, you know, 20 below and your hands are just freezing and you don't have the dexterity, you can still easily set these things up without issue. But hopefully got a whole stream of videos coming in the future. I've really just been busy in my own personal life, so putting out videos you know, on a regular basis has been difficult. I just haven't had the time to do it. But I do have plans to do multiple videos lined up. I'm going to be talking about different portable off-grid shelters that you can use, and I'll be doing examples of, in essence, setting up like off-grid bachelor pads where you have everything from heat to light to, you know, beds to bathrooms to the whole 9 yards, and being able to move that in a portable way into the backcountry, you know, with ease, if you will. Now, it might take a couple trips, but it's still doable without having to rely on a vehicle to get you 100% in. Yeah, but either way, I'll kind of save that content for future. I won't go off too much further about it. But if you enjoy this type of content, please like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching. Yeah, cheers.